In the program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on maintaining fiscal discipline. The participants are D.C. Gupta, former Finance Secretary, Arvind Prasad, Director General FICCI, and Sanjay Jha, India Bureau Chief, ITN News, London, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
A new government is in offering. We are going to see probably general elections very soon, and then post-general elections, it may be a tough time managing the economy. I mean, we are already facing the problem with the economy. How do you see the current mood in the economy?
Yesterday's release of the statistical data by the CSO is not very encouraging because it has stated three things. One is that your inflation, particularly consumer price inflation, is increasing. It is double digit. It is 11.24. It has gone up from 10.7 last month, which is a matter of worry. Second thing is, naturally its impact has been felt on the industrial growth also. IIP has contracted. It has come down by 1.8 or something like that. Third thing, which has come independently, is that while the trade deficit has reduced, which is a happy thing, because your current account deficit can be controlled, but trade deficit has reduced largely because of exports growth having come down to around 5 or 6%, as against 10% or 11% in last few months. Largely it has reduced because of the import contraction. Non-oil imports have come down. Non-oil imports are important because that only shows the demand of the industry, and that naturally follows because the industrial production is not, manufacturing is suffering, consumer durables are not taking place, and that is the reason. So these three factors are problematic. Earlier, a few months back, 1 month back or 2 months back, we were talking of green shoots. Things were looking brighter. I don't say that things are not brighter now. If you
compared to
business, it can be brighter.
Yeah.
But the question is that given the impending elections, much will depend now basically on how does the government take care of its fiscal deficit and finances.
Dr. Prasad, the Reserve Bank Governor has attributed the current economic woes to a stimulus provided by the government to tide over the global crisis of 2008. And RBI Governor had said that it eventually led to an overheated economy, high inflation, and uncomfortable fiscal and current account deficit. Do you think there is much of merit in his argument?
Well, partly it is right, but you see, this is now historic. 2008, this is 2013. So at that stage, all those stimulus did give a boost to the economy, and India maintained its position. Now, even if it was slightly more on a higher side of a stimulus, and if it needed correction, the 5 years were enough to do that correction. I feel that many of the things which we are feeling, the slowing down of economy, are some of the decisions we either made or did not make. For example, 2 or 3 things which has definitely hurt the sentiments of the industry or the investment is, for example, for last 1 or 2 years, whole land acquisition business, that got stuck because the bill was in the parliament. People did not know what will be the form of land acquisition system. There was a proposition in the act that it will be retrospectively applicable. So that affected the sentiment. You also saw many of the things which happened in allocations, criminal cases, corruption charges. So industry got little frightened on all those environment. Some decision about the taxation on retrospective effect. On a larger things, issues like high deficit or high losses in power utilities. Large number of power sector companies are having high losses. There is difficulties on fuel supply. So I don't think that stimulus given in 2008 might have a positive impact on that, may have some continuing impact which might have adversely affected, but many of the other things have really impacted the way we slow down. Our many infrastructure projects got stuck in environment clearances for minor land acquisition issues. So there are many things which are possible, which could have been done, and the economy could have done better. Of course, we can always find, everything must have contributed something, but I wouldn't give a lot of importance to those stimulus given in 2008 for the difficulties we have right now.
Mr. Gupta, I think Dr. Prasad may not find much argument in the Reserve Bank Governor's statement. But one thing I think we all have to agree upon is the slowdown. Earlier we could say that it's a global slowdown, but I think now the current scenario, its slowdown is largely a result of domestic factors. I think even Dr. Prasad would agree with that. And do you agree like it could be because of institutional weakness, withdrawal of stimulus, and some bit of the global, obviously, outlook of the economy? What do you think is the prime reason?
There are several factors. I agree that stimulus was relevant, which was given in 2008 for a few years only. What really happened was, that is my understanding, that stimulus was alright as a dose to the economy or to the industry, because this was basically a fiscal stimulus. It should have been followed by policy stimulus. For example, what Prashad said, that there was a problem regarding land acquisition. Some projects got stalled. There were some CAG and telecom and investors' confidence and all that, which has happened. Second factor which I think is important, which we should consider is regarding the inflation. Now, inflation has been in double digit for a pretty long time now. Now, inflation, as I think RBI has also said that, inflation is the key issue to be handled. Why? Because inflation is affecting your savings rate. And as we know, NSSO survey shows that about 50% of our budget is spent on food. And poor people spend around 60% of it. Now inflation is higher, that means much less saving is available. And worst thing is, which is compounding this problem, that there is no scope, or I would say that scope for diverting this savings, whatever savings you had, to financial markets has been absent. And because of high inflation, the return on the savings has been almost negative. And since there was no alternative avenue for putting your savings in the financial instruments, what really happened is that the savings has gone to physical assets, gold and real estate. Now real estate is already in problem, we are seeing it, because this, I would say, got overheated. Because a lot of money went in there. And you know the problems of real estate. Quite a bit of amount is not by bank finance, it is cash economy, most of it. So we are having that problem. Your saving rates are going down. That has impacted your investment also. The third thing which has happened is the perception. The perception, and particularly our dependence too much on the FIIs to prop up the markets, that has taken a heavy toll. And all that, I would say, was largely because of two things. That there was a perception that the government was not taking policy decisions as fast as they should have. Second perception and second reality, why perception, is that it is a jobless growth. Whatever growth has taken place is jobless. Your avenues for employment has dried up. That perhaps parallel economy or the cash economy has grown up. It has grown quite a lot of late. And therefore, a lot of money is chasing very limited quantity of food. It is not that production has not gone up. Production has gone up. Food inflation, for example, your food production has gone up. Because there are market distortions, we have not taken care of that. Because there is a perception, and that is affecting the thing. So there are a number of factors which have affected this whole thing. And when we are talking of the new government coming in, and the outgoing government will have to take steps, because fortunate thing which has happened in the country in today's scenario is that the elections are being fought on development and economic issues, which is a very relevant thing, and a common man has become very, very conscious of it. It was not the case 10 years ago. So I think the present government will take care that things don't go so astray in the remaining period.
Dr. Prasad, since you represent a trade body, FICCI, one of the oldest trade organizations here, there has been a demand from the industry that the government should liberalize more and more business. Government did liberalize some of the sectors, but despite that, there was no flow of investment from outside, and we rather see a flight of investment from India going to outside India. Why is that so? You did mention about the lack of confidence because of all these policy paralysis, but how would you like to describe the scenario in terms of the policy liberalization?
You see, you are right, in many sectors there has been liberalization of policies which should have attracted investment from outside and also have given a boost to the investment from domestically. But there are also some decisions which are affecting across the sectors, across the industries. I mentioned about the land acquisition. I mentioned to you about the environmental clearances. I have mentioned to you about retrospective effect of taxation. I also mentioned to you about general lack of faith in governance system where you do certain things and which is found to be wrong, and as a business industry you become party to it unnecessarily. government allocates coal wrongly, industry business is not interested you allocate wrongly. But when you allocate and someone participates it, and later on the whole system turns into difficult situation, then you become cautious of that system. Entire 121 licenses of the spectrum were cancelled. So both the first, that the wrongly allocation, that itself creates a lack of confidence. Any decision making, as a big industry or business, you have to interact with the government for variety of resources, variety of permissions, clearances, support. But if you find later on, either the support is given on a consideration which is not appropriate, and also later on that creates trouble, then whole confidence of doing business in that environment gets shaken. So it was a good thing to have liberalized many areas, but I would say that there were many such decisions or lack of decisions which created a problem across the board. And I will again repeat, the land acquisition, the act itself, coming of the acts took 2 years, and then it has implications that the cost will be 4 times, you will have to take 80% consent of the people. There are provisions which will definitely have a very adverse impact on getting the land. Giving appropriate price is good enough. That is really desirable, that those who are affected. But the process has been made very complicated, and it will be almost impossible to have any land for industrial development. And in the past, the process that it will have a retrospective effect, so people are not very sure what they should do. And environment clearance, almost it has become a point where all the liberalization has been taken away, because almost everything now we have to go through the clearance process. So the whole thing of benefit of liberalization has gone away. And also, as we discussed, that the election coming in next 5-6 months, at this stage there has become an approach towards wait and watch, because either the domestic industry or major outside investors will also at this stage would like to see what are the major policy changes or announcement when the election takes place and the subsequent government is formed.
Mr. Gupta, you mentioned about problems with different legislations, but you have served in the government, you know how the government functions. Why is this intra-ministerial fights when probably we are all working for the same ultimate goal of achieving double-digit growth? Dr. Prasad has clearly mentioned about land acquisition bill. There was a clear-cut problem between the Minister of Environment with other ministries, and that's just not one bill. There has been numerous examples where companies have applied for investments, companies applied for licenses, and they don't get clearance for years and years. Then how do you expect to bring the country's economy to the double-digit growth?
You see, we are working in a hierarchical organization, and big industries also work hierarchically. The only difference between the industry and the government is that there is one person sitting there in private industry who takes the decision across everybody. Here in the government, you have a cabinet which takes the decision. Collective. Rest decisions are delegated to be taken by particular ministry headed by a particular minister. So that position, if it is clear to us, then these are not interdepartmental fights as you are putting it. They are not interdepartmental fights. It is that a particular department is insisting on the industry to take particular clearance in a particular formality. Now the question is, the issue is not that whether that department is wrongly doing or rightly doing. The issue is how much simplified the system you have made. For example, he said about land acquisition. Now land acquisition involved not only the government of India, but largely the state governments. And now you have brought in another thing, that if you are in tribal area, then you must take the 70% or 80% clearance from Gram Sabha. Yeah. So one odd fellow, affected some by political consideration, might create a problem for any industry. Now you cannot find fault, because you have introduced already, long back, 56th or 55th amendment to the Constitution, where Gram Sabhas were given certain powers, particularly the tribal areas. So therefore, and similarly in case of environmental clearance is also taken. It is not that environmental clearance should be dispensed with. It should be given. But the point is there are many agencies involved in it. If an industry says this should be something like a very clean road, I bring money back and I should have in 6 months set up a plant. Now that can be done in a system where you have one window clearance and you do away with many formalities like environmental clearance. Now, we cannot do away with the environment clearance, because in the environment clearance, necessarily, you have to involve the state governments. Now state governments' machineries are independent. So all these problems are there. So they are coordination problems. They are not firefighting problems, as you are putting it. And that is why you must have seen it, that government woke up to this problem. What they did, they set up a cabinet committee on investment, CCI. But CCI, again, does it solve the situation? Does it improve the situation? You may clear it at the top level, yes, it is clear. But supposing a particular department insists on it, then what happens? Or labor issues are there which cannot be taken care of by the government. So these problems will always be there with the industry. They will have to keep on doing it. That has been there. But what I would put it in this way, that we need to have, as far as possible, a way out so that the industry's problems can be sorted out effectively at a particular window. And we should simplify our procedures, particularly environment and things like that, so that one spoke in the wheel does not stop the entire chariot.
One of the big rating agency has expressed apprehension that the poor performance of the ruling combine in the recent assembly elections could widen the fiscal deficit, as there may be an increased likelihood of political pressure to limit expenditure cutbacks. And the setback faced by the ruling combine in the elections could potentially raise political pressure on the government near-term fiscal goals. Do you think, are we going to witness any such challenges for the current government?
I definitely feel that challenges in fiscal consolidation will be there and very strongly there. And the worry to me is not just till the election. Worry for me is that even in the new government or even for the next year, it will be difficult because some of the issues which have now largely been taken, like food security bill, our excess expenditure on energy, as Mr. Gupta explained, because of high inflation, people's tendency to invest money in non-productive assets, reducing the savings. So whatever happens in 3 months, I don't think will make a fiscal deficit hugely different, for the simple reason that within 1 month or 2 months, the machinery will get involved in the election process. So ability to spend, excess spending, even though we have the Food Security Act, I don't think it would be possible to spend a lot of money in coming 2-3 months and this fiscal year. But it will definitely have a very long-term implications for the next year. So the rating agencies, or for any person or even for the government, this would continue to remain a concern, how to reduce the fiscal deficit, and also in a manner that you do not cut on what is the development related expenditure. If you spend less on infrastructure, less on power, less on flood control, reduce the deficit, that is of no great help. You have to widen the tax base and you have to reduce the expenditure which is not productive. Then only managing the fiscal deficit will be of great help.
We have been talking about inflation, and even the central bank governor has said he's very uncomfortable with the current inflation level of around 11.24%. The CPI, consumer price inflation data, has also kind of been on the upside, and IIP, industrial production data, has been on downside. How do you see this whole inflation, the IIP and CPI? Maybe Mr. Gupta, if you can tell us, what is the central bank going to do about it? Because even before he took over, and the previous governor of the Reserve Bank has been telling that, okay, we are doing all we can do. The government is not doing its own role. Do you think now, with a change of guard and a new governor, they're all they're talking in one voice?
I think we should appreciate one thing, that RBI is concerned with monetary policy only. And monetary policy has a role to play in controlling inflation. But yet the growth considerations are to be taken into consideration. So therefore, the role of the monetary policy is limited. It may be that he might increase the repo rate or whatever.
CRR and all that.
Yes. The real issue is, which we have to watch, and I hope our hopes are not belied, that the regular budget is round the corner. Now question is whether you will have a regular budget or you will have an interim budget. Most probably it is going to be an interim budget. If it is interim budget, then naturally there is a vote of account. Regular budget will be presented by the new government, whoever comes. Therefore, I wish and I hope that during this time, there is no further damage done. Because elections are around the corner, therefore there will be a tendency to increase spending in social sectors and many other freebuys. Now, that should not happen, because this will complicate the situation for the new government in a very worse manner. Already things are bad. So what we can do is that the one monetary policy RBI should take care, and at the same time the fiscal deficit need to be controlled. And I really doubt whether 4.8% which Mr. Chidambaram has been talking, whether he will be able to adhere to it. And cutting down the subsidies, diesel subsidies have been cutting down, but because of the international crude prices, the other subsidies there is hardly scope to cut down by increasing the rates. It's not possible at all. So let us not think that fiscal deficit can be controlled by reducing subsidies. I only hope that further subsidies are not introduced. Further fiscal imprudence is not shown. Now, because of the electoral considerations. It's a pretty bad scenario, but then it is not a hopeless situation either. Only if we get up our loins, we will be able to handle it. And it requires a tremendous political courage. But one thing which makes me little hopeful is that even this government, if they have to fight the elections, they will be tempted to rectify the economic situation. Because that is going to be the issue before the electorate. So I will hope, reasonably so, that this government does not indulge in many other things which will add fuel to the fire.
Mr. Gupta made a very interesting observation that if this government is going to face the electorates, and obviously they would like to go with a full determination to come back to the power, then they need to rectify the mistakes or rectify that economic climate we have. But will that be possible without giving freebies or having populist measures, what we call, and at the same time maintaining the fiscal deficit of around 4.9%?
You see, my own thinking is that we are already almost half the December is over. So there could be announcements either on the positive side or negative side. But on actual real implementations, I don't think much would be happening this year. Because if nothing else, the machinery gets involved in the attitude of administration, the whole state government. So I wouldn't feel that there will be a lot of expenditure and lot of difficulties on fiscal side because of new freebies. Because even if they are announced, the government's ability to actually deliver, spend money is very limited.
But the electorate are quite intelligent now, they will see the game.
What could create a problem for the new year when you announce freebies and it is undelivered, so there will be expectation of delivery on that side. Similarly, creating a positive mood for economy, I don't know what the government at this stage can do, where there will be a lot of investment, people will start taking the economic decisions. I have my doubts that it would have...
Stalled projects, restarting them, taking some big initiatives, one or two, might change the mood.
The RBI governor has interestingly also said that there is a need to improve the financial system by clarifying monetary policy frameworks, strengthening banking structure through the new entry or the bank expansion and broadening financial market. Talking about financial market, we saw the stock markets really welcoming results of the assembly elections and market sort of. But today it was not the same case. You think it's a momentary euphoria or it's actually an indication that the government really needs to be worried about the challenges, economic challenges?
The considerations on which the market works in India are known best to the operators in the market. We can only guess.
But they represent the popular sentiment.
No, they don't. Which represents it? Because today your FIIs, if you have seen the trend in the market, when FII is coming in, they are purchasing. Domestic institutions are selling. But when FIIs are exiting, domestic institutions do not come and retail investors is left behind. So the question is, why the market has reacted? There is a popular perception. They feel that electorate feels, or market also feels, that if there is a change in the government or this jhatka which is being given, perhaps will wake them up. It is a wake-up call. And as a result of it, some more realistic measures will come to play. Perhaps that is the intention. It may be a momentary thing. Market is definitely going in for a huge correction. That is what some people say who are dealing with the markets. But we really cannot say anything about how market works out. But our perceptions have not improved. That is one thing for certain. They will improve, provided not that our fundamentals are bad. Basically, our perceptions are perception of policy paralysis, perceptions of delay, perceptions of investment not taking place, perception on account of the high inflation persisting over a period of time. All these things have contributed to this. And this gloom might disappear, a few rays of hope, which might be thrown by some intelligent person in the government, showing that they mean business to rectify the situation. So it is quite possible, I feel. And if the brighter lights are there, then perhaps the electoral lights are also brighter.
Mr. Prasad, as you said that we are almost halfway through this month, and that means effectively the end of the third quarter for our economy. So after the end of the third quarter, we'll see lots of data coming in. The companies will be giving their own. What kind of expectation do we see on the corporate side after the end of the third quarter in this economic year?
We expect that minor variation here and there. The situation will continue to remain. We have around 5% of growth rate. We have high inflation rate. We have current account deficit slightly going up and down. I don't think a lot of things are happening at this stage in economy to drastically change, swing this way or that way. It is a stable situation at a very relatively lower level. And I think this will continue to be there for some time. There will be a review by Reserve Bank on 18th. But at this stage, given the inflation and all that, we don't see there will be a lot of changes in the policy at that stage also. The government may try to bring some economic bills to the parliament, but I don't know if any one of them would finally see the light of the day. So I would think that it is fairly stable at this stage, at whatever level it is.
RBI immediate trigger could be RBI's policy coming on 18th, deploying some monetary tools to control tame inflation, and simultaneously government initiating certain steps for reining in fiscal deficit. If these two things happen, that will be felt even within a period of a month.
We spoke about the current account deficit and how big challenge it was for the government, and we will have to appreciate the government's steps. The steps taken by government and also by central bank to increase inflow and restrict gold import. CAD has moderated to 3.1% the GDP in the first half of the fiscal, if you compare it to 4.5% of the last year. You think the government's intention of bringing at sub 3% level from the 4.5 to 5% of the last year, will that really work with this new policy nothing?
As the indications are today, the steps taken already are yielding results, and therefore there is an optimistic note that current account deficit may be within 3%. So CAD need not have a problem unless situation arises where tapering by the Fed, United States, that might affect because a lot of dollars will go out. But when it happens and when it doesn't happen, we'll have to see. But as RBI governor says that he is better prepared because by one stroke, RBI mobilized $34 billion through swap window. So it is an imaginative thing. It is not that it doesn't cost money to the government or RBI. Because when you are swapping, you are incurring a cost. But the point is, at that cost, you have been able to rein in the volatility of rupee and current account deficit. So as far as current account deficit is concerned, indications are that it is not going to be alarming. I think alarming situation would be with regard to fiscal deficit and the inflation. So fiscal deficit is the key.
Fiscal deficit and inflation will remain the challenge for the government for
Absolutely.
this tenure. Also, we hope that by containing fiscal deficit and also bringing down the inflation, we will be able to achieve the positive trajectory for the economy.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time.
You were listening to a discussion on maintaining fiscal discipline. The participants were D.C. Gupta, former Finance Secretary, Arvind Prasad, Director General FICCI, and Sanjay Jha, India Bureau Chief, ITN News, London, who initiated and moderated the discussion. It came to you in the program Current Affairs, produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.